Blueprints came out in April 2025 and seemed like a really early contender for Indie Game of the Year. And then some other stuff happened or something. But Blueprints is still one of the craziest and best puzzle games that I've ever played, so I hope you'll enjoy checking it out. We're playing as a 14-year-old boy named Simon Jones, whose uncle, Herbert St. Clair, just passed away. Pretty sad, but he did leave us the rights to a pretty amazing mansion, including all of the rooms inside of it, land outside of it, and all of the servants that work on the grounds. The only catch is that we need to find the 46th room within a reasonable amount of time, which doesn't seem too crazy. I mean, 46 rooms in this economy is a little bit much, but the mansion is actually only advertised as having 45 rooms. So there is a game afoot here. We need to find this thing because there's no way I'm giving this mansion up. The first scene of the game is one that I will be seeing many times throughout my many days in this game. The slow pan up towards the front of the house, past the 14-year-old boy who's going to be staying here all alone, no questions asked. We come straight into the main central corridor area of the house, and this is where every single day will start. I knew of this game from the demo on Steam back a couple of months before it released, so I knew there were some pretty crazy puzzles in this game, so I was starting out pretty strong by looking around at all of the possible clues that I couldn't possibly understand yet. On the table in the entrance hall, we find one more letter from Herbert laying out a couple more ground rules. We're not allowed to bring any tools from the outside here onto the mansion to help us find room 46, and also we are not permitted to stay in the house overnight. We'll have to sleep outside on the grounds. And that's because this is actually a roguelike puzzle game. We are going to advance through the house by drafting different rooms, and where those rooms go on the map won't necessarily be where they appear on the next day. So all of the progress that we make is going to be slow going and kind of knowledge based. The other item on the table is the Mount Holly blueprint, not to be confused with the blueprints. Here we can view the blueprints of the estate, and we will also be able to see all of the items and things like that we pick up on the way. So now we can actually start the game. There are 3 doorways leaving this room, so we can click on it, and we get 3 options to pick on which room we want to draft in front of us. Options are kind of limited at the start. Starting out, this game has kind of a creepy aura. All of the staff at the manor have been sent away while we're here working on making it to room 46, so the mansion is very empty and kind of creepy. Especially when we walk around and find all of these little puzzles that we need to think about and try to figure out what they mean and how they could possibly relate to other overall puzzles. There's also a resource management element to this game as well. To get into some rooms, we need to spend keys or gems that we collect while playing, but then in exchange, some rooms will also give us items that we can pick up, like this shovel here. The shovel obviously can be used for digging, so we can use that to dig up some certain spots in the manor to get items, like this turnip that gives us more steps to progress further in the mansion. Some of this game's puzzles are big and span over multiple rooms and multiple days, but some of them are actually kind of self-contained, such as this one with 3 boxes with 3 phrases, where one's always true, one's always false, and you need to find the one that's hiding the gems. This game also recommends that you keep a notebook handy to make notes on the puzzles that you're working on. This is the first and only puzzle game that I've ever done this for. I had not full-size pieces of paper, but 37 decent-sized pages of notes that I'll probably flash up on the screen at some points when it's relevant. I also took a ton of screenshots in Steam, so you'll see those as well. This game really has it all. It's even got that creepy machine from Big, where if you put a coin in, it'll tell you your future. And it actually does tell you your future. Of course, in kind of puzzle form, though. Everything fades to black as the great Alzara machine comes to life, preparing to predict what this game is going to be all about. Suddenly, we're standing outside, on the beach, facing a giant castle. That couldn't be right. This isn't inside of the mansion. We're looking for something, but something that won't be very easy to find, if we ever do. There's a cat with a red flag in the distance. And finally, there's a room that's locked but has no key. Ah well, that probably doesn't mean anything. I'm starting to think this guy's a hack. Eventually, our first day in the manor comes to a pretty sad close. As you get further in, there eventually start to appear some locked doors that you can only get through if you have a key card or solve another puzzle somewhere else. We don't have one of those yet, so we're kind of locked from further progression on this day at least. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're done today. There's a whole world to explore outside, at least, on the grounds of the manor. We're 14, what are we gonna do? The outside doesn't really give us much other than a couple of different puzzles that we can start thinking about solving in the future, such as this locked apple orchard that has a 4-digit combination lock on it, or a very dark tunnel with a bunch of boxes blocking our path. I guess we're gonna need to look for some way to light this tunnel up and also get some of these boxes pushed out of the way. Having seen all there is to see and do on day 1, we decide to call it a day. Not super successful progress-wise, but you gotta start somewhere. At the end of each day, the game gives us a little summary on what our map looked like at the end, and also a little description of what our manor actually ended up being like. In this case, a charming cottage. In the next couple days, we start working on some other smaller projects and getting some more of the puzzles figured out. That box puzzle from before was kind of a language-based puzzle that rewarded us with gems. So, in the dartboard puzzle, we need to solve some kind of basic math equations, and that rewards us with keys. This math will get a lot more challenging later on, though. My main strategy at the beginning of this game was just to draft as many new rooms as possible to see everything that the game had to offer early on. And the best way that I found to acknowledge progress that you've made in the game is when the game steps in to play one of these cutscenes for you, like this one the first time we drafted the security room. This room is pretty useful. You can use it to request future items in shops, and also to unlock some of those pesky locked doors that stopped our first day run. But your very first time in here, things feel a little bit eerie as we look through all of the cameras and see that footage is still being recorded even though there's no one here. And yes, that includes this very room that we're standing in, so somebody definitely could be observing our every single move in this house. I didn't know it at the time, but there are actually a total of 8 safes that are hidden throughout different rooms in the manor. So we're gonna work on finding and getting into each of those. I decided to give up on this one pretty quick, deciding that I didn't have enough information, but I definitely could have solved it if I would have looked around the room a little bit more. We haven't even scratched the surface of the game yet, but things started to get even crazier once I found my first magnifying glass and realized that you can actually zoom in on some of the notes that you read to reveal additional information. In this case, it's some stuff that I had kind of already figured out as far as the billiards puzzle, but still good to know that we need to look a little bit closer at stuff. And speaking of taking a closer look at stuff, we draft the laboratory, which also features a whole lot of things to look at. The main puzzle here is the periodic table of elements that, again, we could have solved at this point, but we wouldn't have been able to do anything with anyway. This puzzle is based around having electricity flowing into this room, and we're nowhere near that yet. The laboratory also features a computer that we can access to start running some experiments. These add different rules or things to earn on this day in particular. We're kind of in the just listing off things that we see phase of the game, but I promise it's all important. The library can be used to request different books that will be delivered on future days that we can then read to try to get some more information on actually a whole lot of different puzzles. This game also has some very, very light upgrade mechanics. There are a couple of upgrade discs that you can find throughout the manor, and then if you bring them to a computer, you can choose a couple of different upgrade paths to take different rooms down. These honestly don't add too much to the game though. Our first major puzzle solve of the game comes from when we make it to the dark room, and we find a photograph with an apple orchard in it. And if we use our magnifying glass to zoom in, we see a 4-digit code carved into one of the trees. It's maybe a little bit silly, feels like you could maybe see the code to the gate from standing at the lock, but we managed to get the apple orchard opened up, and now we will start every future day with 20 additional steps. This is going to be huge for making further progress in the manor. Those steps are a great benefit, but honestly the orchard just raises more questions than it answered as we hit a hidden valve that lights one of 4 pyres on fire. What are we even doing here? This puzzle wasn't anywhere on my radar. A few days after that, we find our first real usage for the utility closet. When you draft the utility closet and a garage in the same run, you can actually change the power to on, and then you can use the door to the garage to get outside in another way. That doesn't seem super important until you realize that this allows us to open up another gate access that we couldn't use previously from the main driveway, and that pathway off of the main drive gives us access to the West Path grounds entrance, where we get 8 exclusive rooms that can now be drafted as well. Each of these have pros and cons. Some will give you items to start your day off with, and some will allow you to just dig a little bit deeper into lore, or maybe even get deeper into some of the later on puzzles. For example, one room that you could draft from out here would be the schoolhouse, which adds 8 classroom rooms to the inside manor draft pool, which will be important for an achievement later. It also has the hidden valve to switch on the second blue fire, so I guess we need to investigate all of the outside rooms to really check for all of those. Speaking of permanent upgrades to the manor, we finally for the first time draft the foundation here. This is the only room in the entire game that once you put it down on your manor will not be removed at the end of each day, and its location cannot be altered. We got pretty lucky with its location here, right on the left front side of our manor. Only weird thing is it has this weird kind of elevator shaft we'll have to look into more later. Another room of note, but not a permanent one, is the workshop. You can draft it and then take a couple of the items in your inventory and combine them into one of several specific upgrade paths that will allow you to get more utility out of the items that you put into it. In this first case, we can combine a shovel and a broken lever, but we're missing a third component, so there's nothing we can do right now, but we're going to need to do a lot of crafting here later, so we'll come back to this as well. Back on the outside, we also draft the tomb. This leads to a winding staircase, and down below, a tomb. Well, probably could have guessed that one. It's like the actual one where our uncle is buried, so, you know, if you want to check out a dead body, I guess we know where to find one. This room doesn't really lead to anything, but there are a lot of statues that look vaguely familiar, and some places that really seem like they should lead to another puzzle or something. In a previous run in the chapel room, I happened to notice that there are a lot of stained glass pictures up on the wall that have various numbers and jobs associated with them. I unfortunately didn't grab a good screenshot at the time, so we have to run back and take some screenshots, but then we might be able to use this to get into another puzzle. Turns out that that hunch was absolutely correct. The statues down here in the tomb also seem to have jobs associated with them, and if we use our screenshots from the chapel to look at the numbers, we can go ahead and do those in order. Once we get to the final statue interact, we see a wall open up, which leads to a hidden hallway and yet another spiral staircase down. This might legitimately be the point of the game where you get into it and you're like, oh, there's actually so much more going on here than I possibly thought on the surface. There's a whole underground map that we haven't seen any of, obviously. We didn't know there was an underground. There's a giant mechanical gear room that leads God knows where, with a ton of tunnels branching off of it, apparently. There's even a large underground water reserve, complete with a boat floating in it, and some sort of destination on the other side that we'll presumably need to figure out how to get over to. Unfortunately, this is basically all a dead end the first time we came in here, but trust me, we'll be back here quite a few times later. The final super important outdoor room is the shrine, where you can walk in, put some coins in the bowl, and based on the amount you contribute, you will get a random blessing for a couple of days. This is going to be super important for some stuff we're going to do later. I know I keep saying that, but it's a long game, okay? After that, we are pretty much just cruising along, looking around at stuff normally, you know, exploring the manor, until we accidentally realize that there is a back panel to the foundation. If you connect a room that has a door facing the foundation's elevator surface, it gives you a crank that you can spin around to lower in an elevator from the ceiling, which will allow us to take the foundation path downward. So obviously we rush back around the corner to get in the lift and take it down to whatever this lower level is. I mean, I was so excited, it felt like we were making some really crazy progress, until I realized that we were blocked by yet another locked door. So we will have to come back later. Awesome. Taking a look at Herbert's office for the first time, we can get into his computer easily enough and see that he has some emails about a fuse box repair code. That is extremely interesting to a beast like me who happens to know where a utility closet is, so I kind of fumble my way through getting the code input on the indicator screen, and once we get the colors matched up to the code that was in the email, the wall behind us lifts up, and we see an electricity switch behind it. Of course, we're just gonna go ahead and flip that. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? Turns out the answer is something pretty good can happen. We open up another secret door in the grounds, which gives us access to a little mining area, which allows us to start with 2 gems on every future day. Those gems are a pretty nice long-term bonus, but the thing that I really care about here is this hidden valve that opens up the 4th flame outside, and out of the ground rises up an elevator. Again, going to who knows where, but I guess let's check it out. As we slowly descend down and we start to see the world open up beneath us, this is another time that's like, whoa, how big is this game actually gonna be? It's actually a little bit bare bones down here to start out with, though. The main thing that catches my eye is this chessboard that happens to be laid out in the exact pattern as our manor layout is at the start of every day. And there are some chess pieces that we can move around the board, and we've been seeing some chess pieces hidden in some of the rooms as well, so I guess it's time to start noting down which pieces are in which room. Going into another one of the Big Machine previews, we see that the manor will eventually become extremely run down and reduced to rubble. He also talks about 8 red envelopes being hidden all around the manor. Inside these 8 envelopes will be 8 letters written by 8 different people. But he also claims that we're only ever gonna find 7 of these, which kinda made me feel like maybe we're gonna write the 8th letter until we see that all 7 are laid out on a desk at once. The other absolutely huge hint that he drops in here is calling out 2 specific paintings and says there is a letter missing. Like the 2 objects there, a crow and a crown are 1 letter off N. Aw, cool, the library got my Diary of a Wimpy Kid in. And I'm here to confirm that you can in fact pet the dog in this game. Even though you can't see the hand doing it, there's a hand icon, it's close enough, right? Eventually we get on a pretty good run, our keys and gems are looking good, and we draft the Great Hall. This is a room with a ton of locked doors in it, so we decide to open up a couple of them and see what it's all about. We happen to get super lucky on our first try. We hit a door that has a secret lever hidden in it, and we see a locked door in the antechamber slide open. This is the first run where we've come anywhere close to completing the game, so we race around to get into the antechamber. We happen to get our rooms perfectly aligned, and when we think we're about to complete the game, we find the basement key is sitting in here, with a note that informs us to continue, we're gonna have to swing on down. That's right, we kinda got a little bit trolled here. I could see this being super annoying if you hadn't found the basement access area yet. Luckily for me, I immediately recognize that little symbol on the key, and my foundation is pretty much always accessible to me, so it's time to head on down and finally get into the actual basement. It's looking a little cluttered down here, but honestly, not too bad. I mean, Herbert was here for a long time, you'd kind of expect this thing to be absolutely filled up. There are a couple boxes that could use moved around, but luckily the staff seem to leave quite a few of the ones that we need to move on some wheels that we can easily push around. Down here we find a note that informs us of some of the options for the antechamber entry controls, including the Great Hall one that we found, as well as the greenhouse and the secret garden. Each room also has a backup that may or may not be functional, and to open up the northern exit out of the antechamber, we need to find a lever in the underground, so I guess lucky that we're in here. We managed to push the boxes into an order where we can actually climb up on top and find a secret hidden button that slides a nearby bookshelf out of the way. Walking through that pathway, we realize that we're actually on the other side of that water area that we saw earlier, which is a little bit disappointing to me initially because I was really hoping to take the boat across. But the excitement comes right back around after that once we realize that this also gives us access to the big rotating gear room and a switch where we can move the gear around. Now we just need to find a way to get into the exact opposite tunnel. I wasn't really fully visualizing all of the options that we had here. I shifted the gears around in order to allow us better access for the next time that we managed to make our way down here. And then I called it a day, knowing that I had set us up for future success. Not realizing that I definitely could have gotten into the next area on this run, but I was also a little bit worried we only had 19 steps left, so I wouldn't have made it all the way back to the antechamber anyway. In one of my earliest runs of the game, I encountered the boiler room, which just seemed impossibly difficult on like day 3. It is a huge mess of pipes and steam, but it is also extremely useful. Once you have the power up and running in here, you can use that to pass forward into other rooms, which is super important for some other puzzles that involve things like water levels. I really like this room as an example of a puzzle that is technically solvable the first time you come in, but it just seemed really confusing to me, so I decided to wait until I had a little more information to come back and solve it later. In this same run, we also get the secret garden room for the first time, and I actually accidentally solved the puzzle of pointing everything towards the west, which gives us the western lever to get into the antechamber. So we once again make our way over to grab the basement key, but this time when we make our way back down to the big mechanical room, we are actually able to align the gear correctly, and now we can cross over into new territory. Walking down this big, scary metal hallway, it kind of felt like we were about to board a spaceship or something, but it turns out that we just arrive in a room with 8 regular locked doors and 1 secret lever that opens up the northern path into the antechamber. And we actually have 69 steps this time, so I think we're gonna make it over there. With a pretty straightforward path cleared out for us, we go ahead and make the run back to room 46's door, and we enter into another cutscene where we see Simon slowly opening up the door and getting shocked by what he's seeing as a voice starts to narrate over us the script from the Red Prince book. The narrator question gets answered when we see what appears to be Simon's mother reading her a book titled The Red Prince while he wears a red crown. The narration seems a little bit off, considering we found that other children's book that was very, very similar, titled The Blue Prince. That weird question, alongside what is quickly becoming a pretty eerie series of clips, is really making this not feel like so much of a victory. We get at least a partial answer to the question as we cut back to the current moment and we see room 46 open up once again and get the reveal that the prince's favorite color is now blue as we see a blue crown sitting on a desk. Unfortunately, we don't actually get to go explore in this office of room 46 yet because we cut to the credits for finishing the game for the first time, technically. But don't worry, there is obviously a whole lot more to see. Gotta get back in that room somehow. Once we arrive back in the manor the next morning, we find that a couple of things got delivered for us in the middle of the night, including our first trophy in the game, which comes along with our first achievement, the pretty basically named Inheritance Trophy achievement. We also find yet another letter from Herbert. Gotta say, he's writing a lot of letters from a dead guy, maybe a little clingy, okay? It's basically congratulating us on becoming the Baron of Mount Holly, and also explaining that he felt when he became the Baron that he hadn't really earned the title, and so he wanted to leave us with a little puzzle we needed to solve to feel like we really deserved it. Honestly though, really does feel like we're just getting started. Did not take super long to finish the game, only a couple of hours, so there's gotta be a lot more. One big change to your runs after rolling the credits for the first time is the addition of a couple more room options that will now spawn in your choices, such as the gift shop here. The gift shop is pretty straightforward. You can trade your gold in for some small improvements to a couple of the different rooms in the manor. Still waiting on that Digiblocks update though, that is gonna be a huge one. Another new shop added is the bookshop, which sells books, and also has some information about books on the wall, including a new book written by author Marion Marigold called A New Clue. And it turns out that you can conveniently buy a new clue here at the bookshop as well, along with a couple of other book options. I could really use a new clue though. That would help me out quite a bit, I think. Alright, now it's time to get really serious about figuring out what the actual puzzle is with the 2 portraits that are on the wall in basically every room in the game. We realize pretty quickly that this has nothing to do with what the actual type of room is. Here we're in the guest bedroom, but this guest bedroom won't always have the exact same pictures on it. The portraits are based on where you have placed that room on the grid that makes up the manor. So in this example, we're looking at a flan and sand, which kind of sound alike, but it doesn't seem like it's one letter apart, until I made the breakthrough that it's dessert and desert. So in this case, this room is an S, and we can go ahead and mark an S on our grid. The most difficult wall portrait for me personally was figuring out tie and tier. For some reason, this one took me way too long to understand. And with this last one solved, we uncover that the hidden message is if we count small gates, 8 dates, crack 8 safes. Useful, I guess. I don't know what for. We unlock our next Zoltar machine message, and it doesn't really do a whole lot for increasing my confidence and decreasing the creepiness factor of this house. We start to see images of a guy that kind of looks like an inspector of some sort walking around the manor silently. There's some creepy mentioning of gates being left open and items being taken by someone else. We start to get some illusions that this guy is still here, watching us from afar, and in some cases, very close up. We don't need to worry about the creepy guy that's also in the manor with us though, because we can head over to the trophy room for the first time. This room is pretty expensive to get into, but the gem reward is huge. It's got a big glass wall that displays all of the achievements that we've earned in the game, and there's also a list of all of the future achievements that we're going to need to earn. Actually, pretty cool for my purposes. Back in the workshop, we have finally collected a magnifying glass and a metal detector in the same run, so we can finally assemble a burning glass. This is a super useful craft for us to know about, since now we have the ability to light up some of the specific candles around the manor. Like in the chapel, for instance, that unlocks the piggy bank, which we can break to earn a bunch of money that we deposited previously. One-time use though, so we're going to save it for something really special. Returning to another puzzle that I abandoned early on, but definitely could have solved at the time if I would have taken the time to really look at it, is the periodic table of elements in the laboratory. On one of the other walls of the laboratory, there is the actual periodic table with fake lettering in it, and we can pair that up with the coded version on the wall, which includes a bunch of numbers. And if we pair these out, we eventually get the message push 3 up after 9. So with the message in hand, now we just need to wait for an opportunity to actually use it when we have electricity connected to the laboratory. Speaking of early game puzzles I definitely could have solved earlier, maybe it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the safe somebody got on Christmas might have a code that is just Christmas. It does help that we got that clue about dates cracking safes though, so now we know what to look for at least. Inside the safe, and in fact inside of all of the safes, are red letters, this one being number 4. And just as the premonition told us, it is penned by a different person every time. So in this case, we are reading a letter that our father wrote to Herbert, informing him that he's pretty disappointed that he seems to have completely ignored the disappearance of his niece, our mother. We learn that our mother apparently was fighting for a cause that was very important to her, and it caused her to go away. But old Herbert did not stand with her, trying to protect his own name. Also, our dad had some pretty strong words to say about how we would react upon learning this news. Gotta say, Herbert gave me the manor, so I'm looking pretty kindly on the guy right now. Another extremely interesting red letter is the second one that we find, number 8, hidden in our uncle's office. This letter is interesting because it's actually being written from an anonymous source to Herbert once again. It seems like the anonymous source found all of the other red letters and found some pretty incriminating details in it, I guess such as Herbert covering up our mother's disappearance. So then this person used the letters as blackmail for Herbert, and apparently they actually succeeded in getting whatever it is they wanted from him. The plot continues to thicken when we start finding some fake passports that have been left hidden inside of the vault. Don't know what these are for yet, but I mean, can't be anything good, right? One of the worst rooms for me personally in the entire game is the gallery. In here, you get 4 paintings that you need to interpret, and then you have a bunch of blank spaces where you need to figure out what the name of the painting is. Gotta tell ya, I am not good at interpreting these paintings. This took me a really long time. I decided one night, like 11 p.m., oh, let's do one more run of blueprints for the night and then call it. And then I proceeded to get this in the middle of it, and I needed to spend like an hour in here trying to figure this out. No joke, it took me like that long. There are a fair number of different letters available for each letter slot, but thankfully it's not the full alphabet, so I can just try to make 5, 6, 7, and 8 letter words that will fit in the spaces, and that was a big part of my strategy, honestly. The only painting that I was able to figure out just from looking at is the third one that is 7 letters long, the word realize. I don't know, something about the eyeballs and the word genu, it just seemed like a realize situation. So at that point, it was pretty much just figuring out what all of the letter options could possibly be, and then trying to piece it together. I didn't realize at the time, but there is some more connecting factors for the words. Once you have one down, they all start with the same letter, and they're all kind of following one theme. Eventually, I managed to figure out the 8-letter word ruminate, by the way, a word that I don't know that I would ever really use, but I guess I should start. We finally get all 4 in, which opens up a treasure chest, which gives us another key to a place that we don't know about yet. Moving right along, we uncover another red letter, this time from our mother, who instructed our uncle to guide us towards a safe house where she's left another message for us. So I guess we're being guided? Consider me Gid. All in the same run, we are lucky enough to arrive on the 8th row, where the door happens to be locked, and if we use that room 8 key that we unlocked in the gallery, we actually open up into an exclusive room called room 8, and we see the actual image that we saw in the room 8 photo. Around the room are a bunch of pillars that have the 7 deadly sins listed on them, and on the wall we have a bunch of animals holding little signs that we need to organize based on what they're saying into the correct sin. This was still part of my middle of the night run. We are well past midnight at this point, so I was really trying to fly around, get these statues down, not have to do things too many times over, and luckily we do manage to get this room solved and the hidden wall opened up. It's totally worth it because we earned the achievement Trophy 8 for solving Room 8 on Rank 8, but man, I was so tired and ready for this day to be over. Uncovering red letter number 2 reveals that not all of the letters are actually written to Herbert. This one appears to have been written towards our mother, and it's talking about some sort of big plan coming into motion. It involves members of the museum guard, and it seems like Herbert offered to supply the manor in some way for the planning of whatever this big thing is. Other than getting into the underground for the first time, I would say that the most impactful new thing that you can find in this game is a new clue. This was the book from the bookshop that we talked about before. It is a book written by our mother that is literally filled with new clues. The amount of things to look at in this book is absolutely insane. The amount of wordplay there's all these different hints on every page. I mean, looking at this one, you see the sledgehammer and a vase that you'll notice is actually present in the main entrance hall of the building. This obviously immediately jumped out to me as a clue, but there is so much stuff to be looking at on every single one of these pages, it is extremely easy to miss out on some small stuff like that. And it really only compounds when you come back with a magnifying glass. There's information about looking at different books and going to certain page numbers and certain word numbers. There's all of these different signs that we need to look at. There are maps, there's math. This book has everything. Following that first clue that I noticed, I head back to the main entrance hall with a sledgehammer and smash open that vase to find a microchip was hidden inside. So that confirms a new clue is not playing around. There is some real stuff to find if you scour those pages. I make it back to the workshop on a day where I have a ton of items that are pretty viable to be combined here, and I discover a fun little bug where the power hammer recipe actually has the shovel in the recipe instead of the battery pack, which it actually requires. We do end up crafting the power hammer, which is going to be another huge evolution in our daily progress. The item description advises us that it can be used to knock down weaker brick walls. The first wall that looks pretty breakable that comes to mind is one right out front of the manor, and when we break down the wall, we learn that it is actually connected down into the basement path. So using this, we now actually have a route to get down into the basement and open up the door to room 46 at the start of every single day from this point forward. The other location I remember seeing a big crack in the wall was back down in the chess room, and we open it up and find yet another puzzle. Don't know what I expected. This time it just says the word castle on the wall with a bunch of blank spaces. This is a puzzle that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Ignoring that for right now though, we can continue on with another puzzle that's been haunting us for a little while, the electricity in the laboratory puzzle. We finally managed to flip 3 up after 9, and we see the electric poles outside of the manor jumping to life. With the fuse enabled, we see another hidden door outside open up, and we now have access to Black Bridge Grotto. The immediate vibe upon walking in the first time is that this place is a giant server room, but conveniently it has a place for us to insert a microchip. Just seems like we're missing one more that we need to find somewhere. In the admin terminal that's been set up in the server room, we find that we can now enable external emails from coming into all of the other terminals on the manor. This is pretty cool. We're going to start getting emails in from the staff on the grounds that are currently not working since we're still here exploring. We also have access to a bunch of old admin emails that were taking place before Herbert died, and we have the ability to import trophy data from other save files into this one. We don't have anything to do with that yet, but that'll be pretty useful for some of the extremely late game trophies we need to grab. Back in the manor, we arrive in room 46 for a second time. This time not cutting away to the credits, we actually get to walk around and see what the deal is. A lot of stuff to look at here, starting with a regional map with 8 pins and the message 8 realms in 8 months. Sitting on the desk, we find an item called a Sanctum Key, and also a guide to what the Sanctum Keys are and where we need to find the rest of them. The image here is clearly guiding us to go use this key on those 8 locked doors that were in the room that we used to open up the antechamber in the first place. It also gives us a list of the locations of all 8 of the keys. Some of these are pretty obvious, like locked in the vault of a bank is in the vault. We had actually already found that one previously, but some of them, like held by a king on his throne, is a little bit of a thinker we're gonna have to work on. We also find the serial killer-esque ransom note that was related to all of that blackmail stuff that we learned about earlier. 8 letters, 8 payments of 100 gold. The final item of note is the crown of the Blue Prince. The former ruby crown of Orinda Ares has been replaced with sapphires. It also has the ability to let us refresh the negative rooms in our draw pool, but we're gonna have to get back here and actually retrieve the crown to be able to use that, so it's a little strange. On another day, we find a clue instructing us to go try to dig near the bridge over to the outside room, where we find the second hidden microchip buried in an old jar. Seems like a great place to store it. Obviously, we immediately run that third chip over to the Black Bridge Grotto, inserting it into the machine, where we see a bunch of binary phrases popping up on the screen. This might mean something to me if I could read binary that quickly, but there's no shot of that, so we'll just have to see what happens. Turns out the game's gonna make it pretty easy to figure out what happened when we immediately look up and see that the door is now open. It turns out that this just leads us to another path outside, and that's not super exciting until we get to the top and see some sort of church/ruins type place. But this does allow us to find the blueprint for another extremely important room, the throne room. So now this will be added to our draft pool. All of a sudden, that line about one of the Sanctum Keys waiting with a king on his throne starts to make a lot more sense. The absolutely huge thing about the throne room, though, is that it actually has its own lever, which opens up the northern path into room 46. So now we no longer need to go downstairs if we have the throne room drafted. Our next huge puzzle solve comes in the form of the chess puzzle that we started earlier. I had started keeping note of which chess pieces appeared in which rooms, and unlike the painting puzzle where it would change based on the room's location, the chess pieces are actually set based on what the room is. No matter where you place it, it will always have the same chess piece in it. So, once we have a day where we've got a room drafted containing every single one of the chess pieces, we can go ahead and place those on the chessboard on their corresponding square, and it opens up this mysterious wall revealing a bunch of new pieces. And we get to choose one to gain a permanent upgrade. Each chess piece has its own unique ability. I decided to go with the knight first because it allows us to add a new room to our draft pool. And if we want to change our chess piece choice in the future, we just need to redraft one of each of the chess piece rooms again. The room we get for selecting the knight is the Armory, a new kind of shop that has a couple of different random items that you can buy every day to further increase the power of your run. The huge one that you can only buy a couple of times is the Axe, which allows you to remove the gem cost for drafting certain rooms. I decided to use this on some of our higher cost rooms like the throne room and the attic, and I also put it on the classroom because I still knew there was a puzzle coming with that involved. Not really related to achievements or our overall progress at all really, but just a fun fact, if you draft the boudoir on Christmas, 1225 in the game, there is a Christmas tree and a bunch of presents that have been delivered for you. Just kinda cute. We obviously don't have anywhere near all of the Sanctum keys collected yet, but I decided maybe it's a good idea to start bringing them on down to the lever room and start getting some of these doors opened. They stay opened, you don't need to go grab them a million times over. And it turns out in here we have yet another puzzle. There is a big circle with a symbol in the middle, and a bunch of levers that we need to adjust in order to get the right pattern surrounding that symbol. So we're going to need to do a little bit more research for this. We're in an era of just working on random little puzzles as we solve them in the game now, so it actually turns out there was more to the apple orchard than met the eye the first time we were there. We burn a couple holes in the bottom of a sundial, which opens up the sundial to reveal slots for the 3 microchips. We bring those over from the Blackbridge Grotto, and we open up a permanent unlock of the satellite dish. This is pretty big because it gives us access to even more experiments to run in the laboratory. This makes it even easier to get into room 46 by having one trigger be every time you do blank, open up a random room in the antechamber, or maybe most importantly, it has a trigger to start removing those boxes that were in that big dark tunnel from the beginning of the game. Also, Zoltar tells us that we're going to be waiting for a train for a really long time. Thanks for the Amtrak arrival update, Zoltar. Really using your fortune-telling powers for the greater good. Another goal I had been slowly working on since we unlocked the trophy room and learned what we were supposed to be working towards is the Full House trophy for drafting a room in every single space in your house. And after quite a while, we finally managed to do it. It's surprisingly difficult to have all of your routes pointed in the exact perfect way to be able to put something in every single spot. But once we do, we have the achievement. We will end up doing this a couple more times later, so we didn't need to force it right here like I did, but whatever. We got it now, no worries. Another long-term goal I had was connecting the boiler room to the pump room, which would allow us to remove water in certain areas of the map. I started out with the fountain in front of the manor, which turned out to be another path into the basement. So no real reason to do this, we already have 2 decent ones. It is somewhat annoying to get these 2 rooms drafted together. This is a pretty big sticking point for me in the early game. I was spending a ton of time trying to get these 2 rooms connected, so I really wanted to maximize my usage once I finally got them together. So another thing that I wanted to try out was fully draining the reservoir. And I'm pretty glad that I did that, because on our next day, we decide to head down and check out the bottom of the reservoir, which is absolutely filled with chests. We also notice that there is a path through the wall, but we're going to need to find a way to get in there, as the water has been reduced way too low and there's no way to climb. I happen to have a couple of keys in my pocket, so I decided to start unlocking some of these locked trunks at the bottom of the reservoir. Inside each one of these chests is a color-coded card with a message written on it, and we need to figure out which of the colors is correct or a lie, and which messages are trying to guide us towards the hidden prizes down here. Or, on the very next day, you could get a super sicko mode run where you come down with like 60 keys and just open up every single one of the boxes, and eventually you'll hit the hidden sanctum key. And of course, every time we get a new sanctum key, we're going to go ahead and bring it down to the inner sanctum and start opening the door for it. Our next red letter comes from unlocking the safe in the on-site bomb shelter. Letter number 7 contains another accusation that Herbert was somehow involved in the disappearance of our mother. But it is a little different in that it doesn't imply he made her quote-unquote disappear. Instead, he helped her across the border where she stole a ruby crown, something that seems a little familiar. Back inside the manor, we complete the parlor game correctly for the 40th time to unlock the achievement, A Logical Trophy. After bringing our flamethrower into the freezer and lighting up some of the ice inside, we find that our uncle once again left us another hidden note. This one advising us about the Children of Blackwater, the group that our mother was a part of when she allegedly stole that ruby crown. Unfortunately, at the time of writing this, our uncle was still a little gun-shy about leaving blackmail material around the manor, so this is just informing us about the 8 red notes hidden around, and also the artwork puzzle, so stuff that we had already solved and are already actively working on. We also complete the dartboard puzzle for the 40th time to earn the Bullseye Trophy. And trust me, that math got a lot harder by the end. We were really taking it for granted at the start. Speaking of achievements, I finally had a run that had a lot of gold sitting in my bag, so I decided to go for the achievement for fully buying out all of the extremely expensive items in the showroom. Except once you buy it all out, you need another 100 coins to buy the trophy. So I decided this was probably a pretty good time to use my break pig in case of emergency button. And now we can return to the showroom, spending the extra 100 coins to earn the achievement Trophy of Wealth for fully buying out the showroom. Since we previously finished up all of the stuff that was waiting for us at the bottom of the reservoir, we decided to return to the pump room once again, refilling the reservoir partially, enough that we can now climb down into that boat that was waiting for us on one side and float it around to the other side. Was kind of expecting more to happen there, but I guess we've made a little bit of progress. It is on the other side now. Our end goal was definitely to get in that little side tunnel that was down in the reservoir though, so we're gonna need to go back to the pump room and do a little bit more adjusting. And once we have the water adjusted to be lowered, but not extremely lowered, we can climb back in the boat on its new side and lazily float right down into that side tunnel that we saw previously. Once we reach the end, we come out in a huge underground secret hideout. Don't worry, no water damage from when I had that water all the way up to the top. It does seem kinda inconvenient to need to redraft electricity and the pump room every time you want to go back into the secret base. Oh my god, they just have a bazooka out on the table. Whatever they were plotting here was serious business. Some pretty damning evidence is this map of the Royal Museum that was previously holding the Ruby Crown. When you have phrases like forced entry and escape route written out, doesn't leave a whole lot to the imagination. And we get confirmation that this is definitely our mother and her crew when we find the sanctum key that she left for us, and she also explicitly states that their goal is to steal the crown of Orinda and return it to its rightful place. The other path out from the secret hideout leads us to a long abandoned train track. I assume this is where Zoltar was referencing when he was talking about all that train stuff. I immediately recognized that this map is actually partially visible inside of the New Clue book. So now I rescour the New Clue book and notice all of the road signs that are present inside of it. And if you put all of the directions together, you can actually follow a path on the real train metro map. So following all of those signs, we take a roundabout path from Station 8 all the way around to Station 13. So we make note of all of the stations that we pass through along the way, and we'll be using those numbers to solve a future puzzle based on going to different different books and looking on different page numbers. Back above ground, we're back on our grind of collecting all of the Sanctum keys, starting with AFKing in the clock tower. Once that 1:30 feeling hits, a special cutscene plays and a secret door at the bottom of the clock tower opens up. In the secret room are a bunch of smaller clocks with different phrases on them, and we need to take those phrases to put the correct time down on each of those clock faces. And once we get all of those correct, we get rewarded with another Sanctum key. So my original plan when I found out about the inner Sanctum doors was to get all 8 of the keys, get the rooms unlocked, and then we would go through and solve all of the puzzles. But then I found a passport that had one of the solutions literally spelled out on the cover of it, and I got a little bit excited and decided to just go ahead and solve the first one. Once you get the correct sigil locked in on the center puzzle, it opens up another path where you can go and view a postcard from Baron Sinclair. This is the final postcard in a series of 8, each one of them written from a different location. He alludes to the fact that the other 7 have already arrived, so you can probably guess what's waiting for us behind the other sigils. For the sigil puzzles that aren't as explicitly spelled out as that first easiest one, there are a lot of things that you need to think about when filling out the sigil. Each one of the sigils represents a different realm. So, when you're trying to figure out what the sigil would look like for that realm, you're going to need to go back through all of the information that you know about that realm and try to figure out what the key identifying features of it are. The different symbols in the sigil are based on the weather type, or how people travel, or how advanced the civilization is. Then once you have all of that information, you can pick the symbol that corresponds to that, and the gate will open. Honestly, we got pretty lucky having a book that spelled all of this out for us. We can pretty quickly grab another Sanctum key by drafting the music room in row 9. This one was really just a matter of getting lucky, and it would happen eventually. Going way back to the beginning of the game, I mentioned an outside room called the Shrine, where we could spend coins to gain a blessing. The most important blessing, in my opinion, is the Blessing of the Monk, where if you end a day in one room, that room will then be draftable on the outside at the start of your next day. So I decided to try out doing this with the Antechamber. Sure enough, on the next day, the Antechamber then becomes draftable from the outside. We get the pillar with the basement key that pops up, but this time the little note has changed to say "so close yet so far away." So of course, we need to know what the deal is here. We decide to run down the quick path and open up what would be the door to room 46. But when we arrive back, we don't find room 46 at all. We find 2 more giant shrines holding a message saying "steady is the scepter, deadly is the stone, heavy is the crown, ready is the throne." This message means nothing to me right now, but this is all super important for reaching the game's true ending. Not quite there yet though, bear with me. I also decided to try out the garage path this same way, and you get the same result. Like I mentioned before, when we unlock the new experiments we could use in the laboratory, one of them was to start removing boxes from the super dark tunnel. And we've actually managed to get far enough through that process that we now have a straight path through to the end. We get to the end and we need to insert 1 key. Okay, no big deal, until we get to another door that requires the basement key. Alright, let's go get that. Alright, with the basement key in hand, we can finally proceed, until we get into the next room and see that we need to turn the power off or grab an electronic key card to progress. Okay, keycard in hand. Nothing stopping us now, until we get into a room that is completely boarded up, but there is some cracks in the wall, so now we need to go get a power hammer. Oh my god, what are we doing? Okay, power hammer obtained. Nothing stopping us now, except for the red door. Luckily, I do know how to enable the red door. We just need to go back to the power room and change how we have our flow directed. Except that just takes us to a room with a couple of candles that require our lighter to progress. Well, that's as far as we're getting on this day. We'll have to come back later. We come back on another day with our lighter in hand, only to discover that we're not quite done yet. Now we need to go grab our 3 microchips to open up the next door. At least we know where these are, and they're relatively close. So we grab our microchips, get those thrown in, which opens up the door and leads us to a place that we have no idea how to progress through. The door just has a blue symbol on it, and we have no idea how to actually get this thing opened up. My brilliant idea is to grab one of the microchips out, which will shut the door behind me, but I can quickly back my way through to lock myself in here, and maybe then the door will open. Yeah, pro tip, don't do this. This will kind of soft lock your game, you'll have to end your day. I was super worried about just ending my day here though. I kinda didn't know what would happen with the microchip, so I ended up Alt F4ing out. Turns out that you don't really need to worry about that. If you were to end the day right here, the microchip would just go back to its last home, which was outside of this room. So time to start working on another project somewhere else in the manor. One that I have been working on for quite a while is getting 9 different versions of the classroom drafted. Every time you drafted a new one, you went up a grade and got to see a little bit more information that you would learn in a classroom. Lots of different subjects, and once you get to the 9th classroom, it turns out that you actually start the final exam. This is terrifying. As you can see in the top left-hand corner there, a 30-minute countdown has begun. This is a very real countdown and a very real test about all of the things that you could have learned in the game thus far. That countdown cannot be paused, by the way, so once you walk into this room, you are strapping yourself in for at least a 30-minute experience here. My first thought was there is absolutely no way I'm going to pass this test on my first attempt, so I'm going to go ahead and run through here and screenshot all of the pages in order to come back in a future day. I also accidentally click answers on some of the questions while I was clicking through, and fun fact, you cannot change your answers once you've locked one in, so those will just be misses, I guess. Oops. This test is actually pretty exhaustive. There's math, there's history, there's science, there's geography, there's language. Luckily, I have been taking screenshots of pretty much everything in the game. This is also how I learned that the Steam in Windows Screenshot Manager doesn't actually display all of the screenshots you've taken if you've gone over the limit. If you've gone over the limit, you need to go ahead and open up your actual file explorer on your computer and view your screenshots from there. A little less convenient, but you know, this is real stuff. We've got to be looking at every single screenshot opportunity that we have. So I do what I can. I go through the screenshots that I've got, and then I flip back and forth between those and the test, and I try to do what I can. It is an open note test, so, you know, all those notes that I took will hopefully be able to help me through. I was absolutely guessing on some of these questions, but eventually I do manage to get an answer down for every single one, honestly pretty close to our final time being called, and now I just need to wait until tomorrow to hear back on my results. And walking into the manor the next morning, I learned that it turns out I actually did pretty well. Misclicks and all, I managed to get an A on the exam. Our math, geography, science, and language were pretty good, it turns out. Our history, art, and color, not so much, and once we got into the more advanced math, we were also struggling with that. But an A- is good enough to ace the final exam and earn the diploma trophy. Even though we didn't do super great at geography, I was feeling pretty confident about how well I was understanding the game at this point, so I decided to go ahead and start putting together some more of the sigils. And behind each one, I'm getting more and more confident that we're always going to find a postcard from Herbert's Big Adventure. Back on the achievement side, we finally get a run with a bunch more items, and we can finally combine the coin purse and the lucky rabbit's foot to get all 8 workshop contraptions combined and earn the achievement Trophy of Invention. And back on our drafting rooms outside kick, we decide to draft the Treasure Trove, which has no changes except for one notable one, this creepy looking chest that definitely won't be relevant for something big later on. We are really starting to make some progress on the achievements now. We finally draft the final room option that we have been ignoring up to this point, the Lost and Found. We've had this one in our pool for quite a while, but every time it showed up, I've had stuff that I would rather do with our time. But with that one drafted this time, we do manage to earn the achievement Explorer's Trophy for completing the Mount Holly directory, and we've now drafted every single room at least once. Another room that I had mostly been ignoring up to this point is the Closed Exhibit. It follows the same rules as the Foundation, where you can only access the control panel from the back. And in this case, we can turn off the security measures to run around and grab the red paper crown. This seems to be what our mother and her gang were using to try out their raid tactics for the actual ruby crown in the museum. Another huge quality of life improvement once you get into the late game is the ability to redraw your floor plans once you hit a total of 50 stars collected in the observatory/planetarium. Once you get those 50 stars, you can then begin to spend those to redraft up to 50 times on that given day. Obviously then, if you want to reuse those drafts later, you'll need to climb all the way back up to 50 though. This is huge for getting whatever the room that we want in any circumstances though. The circumstance requiring that many redrafts on this day is that we are trying to complete the drafting strategy sweepstakes. This is a competition we found in a magazine requiring us to draft a total of 20 dead-end rooms in one day. We had a couple of bad attempts. This was our first good one where we managed to get up to 18 rooms with dead ends in them. This is a lot harder than it sounds. There really aren't that many options for dead end rooms, and if you're making a dead end, you obviously cannot continue forward. What you really need is the Chamber of Mirrors, because that allows you to redraft all of the rooms that you have already drafted on that day, so it effectively doubles your dead end pool. This 18 though, man, that was a pretty deafening blow. I felt like we were flying on this run. It turns out that defeat didn't need to feel quite so crushing, as we pretty quickly managed to build our star collection back up to 50, and then we get an absolutely stellar day where we get a total of 24 dead end rooms drafted, and we didn't even need to use every single space on the board. And on the next day, we can go ahead and arrive at the mailroom to collect our trophy of drafting, prize, and achievement. This also comes with a 200 gold grand prize, which is essentially nothing to us at this point. We start with so many coins at the beginning of each day that money means nothing. Our newfound rerolling power is also super important for when we finally need to find the Mechanarium. This is a pretty unique room type that actually has a variable amount of doors. The number of doors depends on how many mechanical type rooms you've drafted on your property on that day. So once we have 8 mechanical type rooms on our property, we can go ahead and draft the Mechanarium, giving us all of the different door options, and once we open up the last one, we will get our final Sanctum key. So now with that in our hand, we have access to every single one of the inner Sanctum doors, so I guess it's time to start solving all of these puzzles. Unfortunately, since I decided to solve the early puzzles earlier on, I am now left with just the difficult puzzles left, and now I'm gonna need to go back to combing through a bunch of screenshots to try to get any information I can about our remaining realms and how I can try to tie out the realm names that I do have to the symbols that are supposed to be representing them. Weirdly, the most helpful thing for me trying to figure out all of the logos is actually looking at stamps from other letters that I've received and trying to pair them out that way. It's kind of what I was thinking before, but as we get more and more of these postcards unlocked, it becomes clear that all of these postcards were sent during one trip. The order in which this trip was taken is what is still up in the air though. Gonna have to use some context clues to figure that out. This did take a fair bit of time and a lot of sifting through screenshots, but once we managed to get all 8 of the realm sigils locked in place, we earned the achievement Trophy of Sigils. Now that we have all of the locations that Herbert went on his wild journey, we need to try to figure out where those locations actually are and tie them out to the map. Once again, this is a little bit harder than I expected. Some names are specifically called out on specific maps, but for some of them we need to dig a little bit deeper and compare multiple maps, multiple screenshots, that sort of thing. Once we have the map and the locations locked into our mind, it's time to return to Herbert's old office and complete the 8 realms in 8 months puzzle by starting to put the pins on the board with the locations of where he was during each of those months. I was making a slight mistake when I was putting the map together in my head initially. I just didn't realize that the first and last postcards were coming from the same place. For some reason, I thought the last one was being sent before he arrived back home, which is definitely not what the postcard said. I was just making stuff up, apparently. Once we solve Herbert's 8 Realms puzzle, we get into his even more secure lockbox, which contains the original deed for the property when the kingdoms were being split up many years ago. Also included in this cabinet is Herbert's real, final, last will and testament, which lists off a bunch of our other family members and the things that they got from him, as well as our big prize of the entire manor, its grounds, and his title. The will also includes a hint towards the title of the gallery artwork, which obviously does not help us now. It also has a clause about the Grand Cathedral underneath the property, and lists out the names of the 8 stone statues that we used to open up the deep down originally. But it's kind of notable that they have been placed in a particular order. We'll have to come back to that. Herbert also claims that he's going to be leaving us our mother's original draft copies of The Red Prince and a new clue. We're just going to need to figure out where those are. It's also kind of important to note that Trophy of Sigils is the last achievement that we're going to unlock in this playthrough, so from this point forward, we're really only doing the super sicko puzzles. Solving this stuff is definitely not required for 100% completion, but at this point, I definitely had to see it through. So our first stop in sicko mode is obviously to return to the tomb and start putting these statues down in the order that they were listed in the will. Luckily, I had made decent notes on what each of the statues' names were as we were figuring it out, kind of pairing out the name to the job, so that made this a little bit easier at least. Definitely wouldn't have been able to do this at the start of the game. We once again descend down to the sub-level where the catacombs were, and another mysterious wall drops out of place. And huge surprise here, Herbert has left us the copies of The Red Prince and a new clue that he promised us in the will. We just had to do a little bit extra legwork to get them unlocked. The Red Prince draft is pretty much what you would expect. It's a lot like the blueprints, except it's been changed around to be a little bit more red-themed, you could say. It does have some interesting notes seeming to tie out to the different realms, but we've already solved that puzzle, so not really a whole lot of help for me here. The draft copy of a new clue, though, is extremely interesting. Some of the images are a lot like what was actually published in the book, but we actually get the notes of what was being called out as being helpful for the puzzles. Obviously, we've solved quite a few of them at this point, so it's not helpful for solving the puzzle, but it is interesting to know what it would have been if it was the original published. In some cases, though, a new clue actually reveals some new clues to us. We eventually arrive on a page that specifically says, "Swap the king with the rook." This immediately jumps my mind back to the chess puzzle, and all of a sudden I realize the word castle written on the wall was not a puzzle at all. It was in fact a command. It was specifically telling us what to do. We needed to swap the king with the rook like you would in a castle. Obviously, this is a whole book. There is a ton more to look at and a ton more clues to see, but my mind was absolutely captured by finally solving the chess puzzle once and for all, so I really couldn't focus on anything other than that at this point. My first thought was maybe if we just go down to the chessboard and set the board up like we were going to castle with the king and the rook, that we would be able to progress, but obviously this is going to be a little bit more difficult than that. Since that didn't work, swapping the king and the rook can really only mean one thing at this point. We do another day on the manor where we fully fill out the chessboard again, getting at least one room of each chess piece, and then we can come down to the board and sure enough we are allowed to reselect a new chess piece as our overall permanent upgrade. We choose the Banner of the King, who has like a fine ability, but we don't really care about the ability. We are literally just going to try to swap him for the rook anyway. It turns out that in the late game, it is pretty easy to manipulate your manor to look like whatever you want it to look like, so on our next day, we are able to once again summon all of the chess pieces. This time we select the Resilience of the Rook, which gives us a surprising result of physically swapping the king and the rook in the places that they were sitting previously. And of course, you guessed it, this opens up yet another secret path down. Downstairs, we find ourselves in another tomb, and we find a bunch of statues holding a bunch of little colored puzzle boxes. These have been scattered all throughout the manor, but they haven't been super important up to this point. They've only contained like allowance tokens for the start of each day, which is cool, but not super important. But now we're actually going to need to solve all of these to progress even further. Some puzzles are pretty easy, some are not. The gimmick here is trying to figure out what each of the colors actually does, and then clicking on them in the correct order to get the specific colors in the corner, and then you can activate the box. Once you finish a box, you get another clue about this room in general. Some of these puzzles are pretty straightforward. This one says on the sacred hour, which is 1:30. We haven't heard it called that, but we understand that 1:30 is an important time. Some of them are less straightforward, but we can probably guess. A youth approaching with empty arms, okay, we can't come in here with any items. But a message like a patient figure, a reckoning great, is just not something that I was understanding at this point. This is where my time as a sicko mode puzzle solver actually came to an end. These puzzles are getting pretty complicated, and while I can figure out parts of it, I don't know that I would have been able to put together everything needed at this point at all. So from this point forward, I don't want to take any credit. I was pretty heavily relying on guides and looking stuff up online. We're so close to the end of the game that I definitely wanted to see it, but man, the people that actually figured these puzzles out, this is crazy stuff. So the part that I was able to put together myself is that we needed to come back here to this underground area at exactly 1:30, which we just AFK'd for, while also having no coins, gems, keys, or items, while we had the constellation Southern Cross activated, which is 5 dots aligned in a cross pattern. Once all of those conditions are met, at exactly 1:30, the tomb, quote-unquote, rises up out of the ground, and we have another puzzle to solve based on a clock. This was not something that I would have been able to solve on my own. I just did not have the pieces required for it yet. It's going back to the castle puzzle, and I had not fully put it together. The puzzle is solved by correctly winding the clock that is attached to the tomb, and once we get it set to the correct time, it pops open and gives us access to another hidden key. This manor loves its hidden keys and hidden doorways and hidden anything. The key is called the Royal Key of Ares. Oops, I super accidentally lied to you earlier. Turns out if we return to the treasure trove with this key, that box I said wasn't at all important can actually be opened up with this key, and we get the Royal Scepter. A super cool item that allows you to pick a color at the start of the day, and then all floor plans of that chosen color are more common. So now it's time for us to start working towards another one of the game's endings, quote-unquote. And this starts with us redrafting the shrine, but this time we're not worried about making a donation to get a specific perk. We're actually focused on the little locked box on the left-hand side when you walk in. Here we grab the Cursed Effigy, which unlocks Cursed mode from the starting menu, which will be important for later, but for our purposes it is needed for the ending of the game. Now that we have officially collected the Scepter, the Cursed Effigy, and the Ruby Crown all in one run, we can enter into our throne room and officially ascend as its rightful king. We see a brief scene with a young boy who stole the Cursed Effigy way in the past that we also learned about in one of the books in the game, and we see our mother and her heist to steal back the Ruby Crown that was rightfully owed to us, at least as far as she's concerned. Once we sit down on the throne with all 3 of these items, we get another title card drop, so this is another place that you could legitimately call the end of the game, but we're not quite done yet. The throne room has been permanently ascended to the throne of the Blue Prince. So now, if we can manage to draft 8 blueprints in a row, we will permanently unlock all blue sealed doors, and I happen to know where one of those is. It turns out that when you have the Royal Scepter increasing the odds of drawing blue rooms, and also the ability to reroll essentially for whatever we want, it is pretty easy for us to draft however many blue rooms we want in a row. We just need to walk all the way down through the tunnel of shame and defeat, once again, recompleting all of the doors that have resealed since we were last down here. Once we arrive at the end of our path, the blue door does in fact open up, and in front of us we find 3 boxes. Very similar to the parlor game puzzle, there are 3 messages. There is no end to this journey, there are 2 true boxes in this room, and you have reached the end of your journey. We only have 1 key available, so the first box I decide to open up is there is no end to this journey. I feel like I'm picking correct as we cut to a cutscene where Simon is slowly opening up the box, only to reveal that there is in fact nothing inside of here. So I guess we chose incorrectly. After that, I decided to take a shot at there are 2 true boxes in this room, which also seems to be incorrect as the box is empty. And finally, we use another key to open up You Have Reached the End of Your Journey, which does in fact contain the draft copy of the Blue Prince. This draft copy turned out a little bit off from how the actual final book that was produced came out though. This one is more about the game that we have been playing and the mysteries that the Blue Prince has solved, rather than the story about finding a color that you really like. Back on the sicko mode puzzle grind, we need to take the room 8 key back into the vault and use it on lockbox number 53. Here we find another letter from Herbert, this one talking about a puzzle that he actually inherited from his brother. His mother had left his brother a cipher that he has been trying to figure out for decades at this point and hasn't really made a whole lot of progress with. So once again, this puzzle is being passed down to us. But, I mean, he wasn't able to solve it in all of those years, so we're surely not going to be able to solve it in a couple of days, right? After all, he says himself that a life without mystery isn't a life worth living, so we probably shouldn't solve all of the puzzles that the manor has left us. So anyway, for totally unrelated reasons, let's go grab a watering can. And for totally unrelated reasons, let's go refill the watering can with distilled water. Oh dang, clumsy me, I accidentally spilled my distilled water all over one of the old books in the library. Oh no, I'm so clumsy, I did it again. This time I accidentally revealed a message from my great uncle's mother that was left here so many years ago. Oh no. I can't do anything right. I guess I should just end my day right here in the secret passage for no reason in particular. Oh, wait a minute, but maybe we could try drafting the secret passage outside. Oh, what's this? There's a new book here. Maybe we should put some distilled water on it. Oh, it's turned blue. Oh, well, we've got to check what's behind here. Okay, it's a blue door. Oh my gosh, and the secret blueprint drafting room where all of the rooms that we've been going through were originally created. I'm a genius. How has no one found this before? Real talk, it is pretty cool to walk around here, and it felt like we were really seeing something special when we got to this part of the game. Obviously, I wouldn't have made it here on my own, but still felt like this is something that such a small percentage of people playing this game will actually see in person that it was a little bit unique. In the center of the room, we find the original drafting table and a note from Lady Arave. This would be Herbert's mother. And upon looking up what our great uncle's mother would be to us, I learned that that is in fact just our great grandmother. Yeah, I probably could have solved that one without Google. Turns out that she is the original person who designed this house, and this is where she did all of her planning to make the house a reality. We haven't even seen the craziest thing about this area yet though. Once we open up the door outside of this room, we enter into the original Mount Holly blueprints, where we are literally now inside of the blueprints. There are colored lamps hanging from the ceiling, and we can actually go inside of the draft version of all of the rooms that we have seen up to this point. Though this place is a little bit of a maze. Somebody should really make a puzzle you have to solve to get around here. If you are able to successfully decode the cipher that we found in the vault, you can follow a path through the blueprints to eventually arrive back in the manor office of room 46. Here we uncover the final last will and testament of Baroness Arave. In this will, she talks about what she will leave to her husband, assuming he survives her, as well as her 2 children, Simon, not me, and also Herbert, our great uncle. What a crazy plot twist it would be if it actually turned out we were Herbert's brother just posing as a 12-year-old boy this whole time. That would be crazy. Notably, this will does not include any information about who will be receiving the Mount Holly estate, be it her husband or either of her two sons. In fact, she goes so far as to say that the person most deserving of this manor will be whoever it is that actually managed to make it all the way to the end of her hidden mystery and all of her clues to find this hidden blueprint deed. So now that we have this in our hands, that deed that we were given by Herbert is actually, I guess, null and void, and now we officially own Mount Holly. And in addition to all of the riches that we've just earned, we also earned the esteem of our great-grandmother. I guess that's worth something. It is extremely possible that I missed some stuff during this playthrough of Blueprints. I mean, there's definitely some hidden stuff that maybe literally nobody has found yet, but this is what I would call the official end of the game, at least one of them. This is as far as I could figure out from looking on Reddit and all the other online sources. Nobody really knew anything else there was to do in the game from this point. So now, with the main game completed, it's time to start a couple extra save files to work on some of the hardest challenges I've ever done in gaming. We are going to need to do several things. We're going to need one save file to complete the game on our very first day. In other words, make it to room 46 without ever ending the day. We're also going to need to complete the game in Dare mode and Curse mode, but we'll get to those in a little bit. So, completing the game on day one is a pretty lofty goal that is almost certainly going to require a lot of resets. At least, it definitely did for me. This run is extremely RNG dependent, and also you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to gain perks from rooms that give you added benefits on your next day. To go over the list of things that you're going to need to do all in one day in order to complete this challenge, you are obviously going to need to have a completed path from the beginning of the manor all the way through to the antechamber and then to room 46. Starting from the back, to get into room 46, you're going to need a way into the basement. There are a couple of ways of achieving this, but you're actually going to need to have two paths forward unlocked. Once you get down into the basement, you need to move the minecart one direction or the other in order to actually access the giant mechanical room to rotate your path. So there are a number of ways that you can do this. You can rely on getting the foundation unlocked and getting around it to lower the elevator portion of it, but the foundation is kind of an uncommon room to see on your very first day. I actually only saw it a handful of times. You can also get there via drafting the tomb for your outside room and then going down that way. Though the tomb is not able to show up in your first 3 drafts on the outside room on day 1, so you're going to need to have at least 1 or probably 2 rerolls available to you to be able to get the tomb to show up at all. Your other option to get down to that portion of the underground area is to remove all of the water in the entrance fountain, and then you could get down there and move the minecart that way. But then you also need to be able to get over to the other side where you normally come in from the basement. That is where the foundation connects, or you could get access to the pump room and take the boat over. Or if you want to skip the foundation, you could also build the power hammer and bust your way in through the bottom level. That is the route that I ended up taking for the majority of my runs. The power hammer is actually not as difficult to get on day 1 as you might imagine. It was actually a pretty consistent part of the run, but sometimes you do miss out. You do need to get the sledgehammer, the broken lever, and a battery pack, and also draft the workshop to actually be able to put them together. So that handles all of the things that you need to be looking for from the start to actually get into room 46. But what about getting into the antechamber to begin with? There are only so many options to actually open up the antechamber in the early game, and the one that you go for kinda depends on your luck, so this is a challenge that really requires you to be thinking at all times. If you have the power hammer active, you could go through the weight room, but that's gonna cut your steps in half. If you draft the greenhouse, you could go that way, but then you have to use the broken lever to fulfill that requirement, which means that you're no longer able to use the power hammer. You could rely on drafting the Great Hall, like I did the first time I got into the antechamber, but that probably means you're going to need to spend a decent amount of keys to actually get the correct door opened up with the lever. And if you burn all of your keys trying to get access to that lever, that could lock you out in the late game, as it did many times for me. The option that turned out the most consistently for me in this regard is definitely the Secret Garden, but that requires you to also get the Secret Garden key. This can randomly spawn in a bunch of different rooms, but the best way that I found it normally was just from completing the billiards room puzzle. It's the early game, so the math is still pretty easy. And we haven't even mentioned, assuming you're able to pull off getting a path all the way through the map, now you also need to make sure you have enough steps to actually make it all the way through that path. You don't have the shortcuts unlocked, so you're going to need to get all the way through the manor until you have your path to get the antechamber opened up. Then you'll need to go on downstairs all the way through the shifting gear area to turn around and actually make your way all the way back through. And frequently, I did run out of steps. There are just some runs that don't get going enough and burn themselves out. On top of all of that other stuff needing to go right for you, there are so many little things that can just ruin a perfectly good run. If you're going to rely on using the tomb to get downstairs, you need to get access to the garage, power it, and open it up. Then, if you're going to need to use the tomb, you need to have 2 rerolls available for you to actually get it. On top of that, we haven't even really thought about the odds of getting the items that you need, or even getting the rooms that you want to face the direction you need them to go. I had so many runs that were so close. We were just 1 reroll away, or 1 access to the basement away. This is really such a difficult challenge, and you need to have such a strong understanding of all of your paths forward on any given day. The main strategy that I was relying on for the majority of my runs was running straight in at the start of each day. This normally gives you a closet where you get 2 random items. I was really hoping to either get a reroll die or a sledgehammer in here. If I didn't get good items, I would pretty frequently just reroll my whole day and hope for something better the next day. I was frequently on the hunt for the power sledgehammer and then another path to get down into the basement, frequently looking for the 2 reroll dies to access the tomb on the outside along with the garage path. And then basically whichever option I got as far as opening up the antechamber. Normally looking at the weight room, the Great Hall if I had to, or primarily the Secret Garden. After many failed attempts, the finally successful run that I had was using the power hammer to open up the basement route. I then went down, rotated the wheel around a couple of times to give access through the other side. I had already drained the water all the way out of the central fountain, so I was able to run down there and use my basement key to pass through to the big shifting gear room that I had already aligned, so I could finish the rotation on it and make our way over to open up room 46. Then I rotated back around through the garage that I had left open, and I made my way all the way to the antechamber that I had unlocked via the Secret Garden passageway. And then finally, on the next day, we load into the mansion. I legitimately felt like crying. After 150 whole resets, we see 3 trophies sitting, waiting for us on the entryway table. We unlock the achievement Day 1 trophy for reaching room 46 in 1 day, and Trophy of Speed for reaching room 46 in under an hour. Oh my god, that was intense. Thankfully, I would say that that is the hardest challenge in the game, and the other 2 are significantly easier at this point. In my opinion, after the Day 1 challenge, the next most difficult would be Dare Mode, so I decided to tackle that one next. This game is the exact same, except on your first 4 days, when you walk into the entry hall, you see 4 dares listed on the table. In this case, I dare you to always draft a red room when one is drawn. Red rooms are pretty difficult and can sometimes just end a day for you if you get one in a bad position, so I decide to do the lame thing and reset that. Basically, on my first 2 days, if I got a dare that I thought was going to be pretty difficult to complete the game with, I would just reset until I got a list that I was pretty happy with. Some of these dares get pretty brutal, so I honestly don't feel too bad about resetting in this way. If we get a dare like I dare you to never eat fruit again, we can definitely continue playing forward with that one. In this game, eating fruit gives you extra steps, so that's a little bit annoying. But the main downside of that is if we ever do any of these things in dare mode, we just automatically fail. So now I just need to keep it in my head that we can't eat fruit. But then on the other hand, you can also get a dare like I dare you to never have more than 2 special items in your inventory that extremely restricts the way that you can play the game and might make you want to reset. In the end, the final dare combination I went with was I dare you to never enter a room more than 3 times, I dare you not to step foot in the pool, I dare you to never ride elevators, and I dare you to never exit the house from the entrance hall. I would say that this is actually a pretty difficult combination overall. Not being able to ride elevators means that we cannot take the foundation path ever. And not being able to exit the house through the entrance hall means that we are always going to need to have the garage open and exit the house that way, as that is our only option to get under and access the antechamber with no elevator. And then never being able to enter a room more than 3 times means that backtracking is a no-go more than once. This was a pretty difficult combination, but the fact that you're able to accrue resources and advantage every day where you couldn't on the day 1 challenge allows us to eventually accomplish this pretty quickly. We managed to complete dare mode in just 20 days, which seems pretty good, and once we return to the manor on the next day, we can collect our prize and earn the achievement Dare Bird Trophy for reaching room 46 in dare mode. So now it's time to work on the final challenge mode of the game, Cursed Mode. Cursed Mode is horrific. You cannot believe the curse that you are under. It's actually not that bad. You start out with only 13 steps, which is a little rough. And every time you draft a bedroom, you lose 1 step. Every time you draft a hallway, you lose 1 key. Every time you draft a green room, you lose 1 gem. And every time you draft a shop, you lose 1 coin. And if you draft the cursed red room, you lose 1 of each. My first thought is starting with 13 steps is a little rough, so I would head on over to the orchard and unlock some more, only to find that the orchard has been absolutely torched in this timeline. Okay, so it's gonna be a little bit more difficult than I thought. My main focus was on slowly building up our constellations, and also looking for a day where we could get enough steps and enough rooms put together to finally build out a perfect chessboard. This allowed me to once again get the Banner of the King permanent upgrade. Now we have a much higher chance of getting a blue room during any drafting period, and blue rooms don't actually have a negative effect, so that is pretty big for me. And eventually, with enough patience and enough room luck, we are able to complete the game in Curse Mode. This actually only took 57 days, and some of those were real duds, so this actually went by pretty quick. As scary as Curse Mode might sound, it is nothing compared to the Day 1 challenge. And now with that final challenge completed, we can return to the central room one more time to earn the achievement Curse Trophy for reaching room 46 in Cursed Mode. So now we can return to our original save file, head on over to the Black Bridge Grotto, and transfer over all of the save data from the other save files. This gives us the Day 1 trophy, Speed trophy, Dare Bird trophy, and Curse trophy all in our original game. And so, with all of those transferred over, we can play one more day out on our original save file. And when we make our way over to the trophy room, we can collect the Trophy of Trophies for completing the trophy case. And after a long battle, we can officially say we have done everything in Blue Prince. Oh, now I get the pun. But how did we do? 100%ing Blue Prince took me a total of 113.7 hours. My first achievement was earned on April 26th, and the final achievement was earned on June 26th. So that is a solid 2 months of gameplay, and you gotta remember that we didn't earn our first achievement until we had beaten the game and rolled credits for the first time. Blueprints is a really difficult game to talk about. This is unlike anything else I've ever played before. I've dabbled with the escape room type of game or the puzzle box type of game before, but never a roguelike puzzle game like this one. I kind of alluded to it at the start of the video, but at the start of 2025 when Blueprints came out, it seemed like this game was poised to be Indie Game of the Year. And then 2025 being what it was, there have been quite a few indie games that have released that have kind of overshadowed Blueprints a little bit. That being said, this is easily one of the games that I spent the most time in this year, and one of the games that felt the most rewarding to complete. Every single time you made a breakthrough on a big puzzle you were stuck on, it just felt so good. There were occasionally puzzles that I stumbled into the answer for, but the majority of the time, the game gave you quite a few clues and ways to figure things out, and that also leads to a lot of variation between different playthroughs. Something you picked up right away the first time you saw a room might have been missed by someone else until they were 50 hours into the game and started looking a little bit closer at things. This game is really such an unforgettable experience, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. Cutting this video down was pretty difficult. Going from 114 hours of footage, I cut that down into about 6 hours, and then my first voiceover left me at about 3 hours, so I cut even more out of that. I tried to get the video down to just the most important stuff and make the story a little bit easier to understand, but just by the nature of what this game was, I was experiencing things in such small chunks that it might be a little bit difficult to follow the story if you're not a little bit familiar with it already. Also, just by the way, when I moved my schedule earlier in the year from uploading weekly to uploading every other week, this was one of the games that was a big driving factor. I never would have been able to complete a project this big while also releasing a new video every week. Honestly, it's still been a little bit of a struggle. This is a lot of footage to go back through and edit and voiceover, and this is actually only the first of quite a few 50+ hour playthroughs that I've already fully finished and now just need to edit and get out there. But anyway, that is all back-end stuff that doesn't really matter. As always, if you have any thoughts about the video or things that I missed or things that you wish I would have included, please feel free to let me know those down in the comment section below. Or if you have any other games you'd like to recommend I check out on the channel, you can leave those there as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya! Ooh, it's a mystery.